And I want to thank particularly John McCammon, who is here, thanks to whom I came to Denver, because he convinced me that I shouldn't apply to an Ivy League school, and I wanted to apply to an Ivy League school. And he said, go to the GSIS at the University of Denver and get out of Chile because you're going to get killed. He said to me, and my wife said, follow the advice of the bearded man. So I did, and I thank John for everything he's done, not only for me, but for generations of students at the U. I see some Chilean friends here whom I am very attached to, because we went through the difficult times of the dictatorship. So I'm glad that, to see them here. And I thank the Human Rights Center and the Journal for inviting me. I'm really honored to be their first guest, as I understand it. So thank you very much. Let me get into what I would like to talk about. In my new capacity as Assistant Secretary General of the UN and in charge of Latin America and the Caribbean of UNDP, I have two major issues that I'm working on that I want to try to support governments into tackling with greater intensity. And that is democratic governance on the one hand, because even though Latin America has lived perhaps the longest period of democracy and electoral democracy, it faces issues as regards the quality of democracy. It's not the quantity of elections, but the quality of that democracy in the region that is the challenge ahead. There's corruption, there's frustration among young people, there's apathy, institutions are weak, and in essence then there's still a threat hanging over the horizon. The other issue is poverty, and more than poverty, inequality. That's a critical issue. In fact, democracy in Latin America is threatened by three issues, I would say: weak states and institutions, insecurity, violence, crime. So the issue of state that responds to the minimum requirements of security, it is threatened today throughout the region, in some countries more than others, but even in those countries where it is not, the perception of threat and insecurity is such that when perceptions are reality, then you have a problem region-wide. Guatemala has 34 murders per 100,000 population. Other countries in Latin America have 10. There are areas in Guatemala where there's 100 assassinations per 100,000 population. This is a huge number that gives you an idea that insecurity then is a second problem. And the third problem for democracies in the region is inequality. And this is what I'd like to perhaps concentrate my talk about, because we just produced the 2010 report, the Regional Human Development Report for Latin America and the Caribbean, first ever, because we produced a global human development report and then national reports, and this is the first region-wide. And we did it on the transmission across generations of inequality, because the characteristic of inequality in Latin America is that it is intense and that it is persistent over time. So let me begin by giving you a bit of a summary of what is in this report that we just translated, by the way, to English. And let me start by sharing with you a piece of an article in The Economist that was just appeared in the January 20th edition of The Economist. It's entitled "The Rich and the Rest: What to Do and Not to Do About Inequality." That's the title of the article. The article states, and I quote, "The debate about inequality is an old one. The right way to combat inequality and increase mobility is clear. First, governments need to keep their focus on pushing up the bottom and middle rather than dragging down the top. investing in and removing barriers to education, abolishing rules that prevent the able from getting ahead, and refocusing government spending on those that need it most. Second, government should get rid of rigged rules and subsidies that favor specific industries or insiders. End of the quotation. This, in my view, is the conventional way of tackling inequality. Boost competition, loosen social barriers, and increase upward mobility. There are some components, for sure. Increasing upward mobility is one of them. But the problem is a lot more complex, and particularly in Latin America. Inequality is one of the main traits that characterize the history of Latin America and the Caribbean. It is persistent, it is significant, and it has led the region into what we call an inequality trap, a vicious circle that is very difficult to break. There is inequality in income, education, health, and many other indicators that passes from one generation to the next through various mechanisms that I would like to illustrate in a while. In the UNDP, we addressed this issue in this report by offering an analysis of why inequality persists over time. And the political message of this, and I insisted while we were preparing this in the first months that I was at the UN, that the region can't wait, that this is a political priority, or should be among the top political priorities, if not the top political priorities of all of the governments of Latin America and the Caribbean. It is a call to governments to take action, to reduce this inequality that affects the economy, politics, society, and for sure people's lives. 10 out of the 15 most unequal countries in the world are in Latin America. Latin America is not the poorest region in the world, it is the most unequal. And this is something that it is intolerable in my view. The Gini coefficient for the region, as you know, the most used indicator to measure inequality, is 65% higher than that of high-income countries, 36% higher than that of East Asia, and even 18% higher than the average for sub-Saharan Africa. And you can see that in this figure. This is Latin America right here. Asia, the developed countries, Africa. So this is, frankly, a situation that is unbearable. The figures, of course, hide significant differences. Bolivia and Haiti are the most unequal countries in the region, with a Gini coefficient of around 0.60. In contrast, countries like Costa Rica, Argentina, and Uruguay show greater equality with coefficients below 0.49.